Thank you very much to Crazy Cactus 72 for becoming a member of the Kinetic Rugby League channel. If you guys would like to become members, you can do by clicking the join button below this video and joining for as little as £1 per month. But I do need to let you guys know there is an interview on the Kinetic Rugby League website with Huddersfield Giants player Leroy Cudjoe. Now, I'll leave a link in the description below this video. If you click that link, it'll take you to the Q&A that I managed to get with Leroy Cudjoe of the Huddersfield Giants, and go read that today, after this video of course. But that's it. Let's crack on with the video. Early warning, people, you will disagree with this list. So I think I'm going to have to focus more on justification than actual performances. So I'll do my best, but let's start with 12th place. So in 12th place, and still in 12th, I have Salford Red Devils. Now, the scoreline in their defeat to Hull was around what was expected based on recent results and performances. Looking at the tries they conceded, you can draw a positive and a negative, I suppose. The negative being that most of the tries conceded were far too easy. The positive being that they're off the back of pressure on the goal line. And from what I can remember, they haven't conceded a ton of tries from long-range breaks, if I remember correctly. So it's not like they're just letting teams stroll in wherever they like on the field. But the goal line defence does need some work. And of course, a try at home, given the circumstances, is always nice. But as of right now, I have Salford still in 12th. On to 11th, and still in 11th, I have the Catalans Dragons. At least the result this week was much improved. Against a strong side like Leigh as well is, I suppose, a positive. Now, they were also down to 12 men at one point after they'd been able to keep the scoreline at 12 all for around an hour. But momentum started to build for Leigh with the extra man, and they got the job done in the end. Catalans could have moved up this week, given the efforts being drastically improved, and a team that's in 10th place that could have moved down the list after being battered this weekend. But with Catalans still on a 6-game losing streak in the league, they've got to actually win some games before they can move up. So I've got Catalans still in 11th. So moving on to that 10th place team, and moving down one this week, I have the Castleford Tigers. They were simply outperformed by a far superior side. I think that's been the tale of Cas for most of the season. I can never fault their efforts and willingness to have a go in possession or back each other up on the goal line and keep teams out for some periods of the game, but just overall quality of opponents over 80 minutes is usually just too much. And against Hull KR at this time, they had way too much speed for them. As I mentioned with Catalans, they have lost 6 games in a row, but Cas have at least won 2 in their last 5 games, so they stay just above the Dragons for now, but they move down 1 into 10th. Then we move on to 9th place, and moving down 1 this week, I have Warrington Wolves. Really poor effort from the start, and they didn't show up until the scoreline was starting to look out of reach against Huddersfield, and then they actually had a go at throwing the ball around with a bit of pace and a bit of intent. There were plenty of times where Sneed's kicking game really helped with field position, or spreading the ball early in the set helped to work the ball up the field a little bit more, but Wyatt just aren't creating line breaks at all. Now, the injuries don't help with combinations, but that's when the defence has to show up, and for a lot of the season, it just hasn't, especially on the goal line. Warrington are really, really struggling at the moment. They do need players back, but as of right now, they move down 1 into 9th. So that means moving up 2 into their highest position so far this season, in 8th place, I have the Huddersfield Giants. They actually look like a competent side, and of course, having their best players coming back in is a huge help. Their carries were great. They ran the ball with a lot of energy. On an individual level, I think players did a good job of making wide players miss tackles to extend plays. They defended quite well for long periods of the game, and they didn't give many easy opportunities away, I don't think. And in back-to-back weeks, and I guess back-to-back-to-back weeks, they've been stress-tested towards the very end. But in those back-to-back weeks, they've looked stable and reliable. Now, we'll see if that continues, but Huddersfield Giants move up 2 into 8th. Then moving on to 7th place, and still in 7th, I have St Helens. Now, they're in a bit of a weird spot right now because they've actually won 4 in their last 5 games. But 3 of those wins were against Catalans, Salford, and Huddersfield Giants before their improvements in the last few weeks. So, yes, they're getting the wins, but at the same time, they weren't against very strong opponents. However, they did face Leeds at the weekend and put in what I thought was quite a professional performance. Leeds weren't good at all, but Saints really took care of the ball. They moved it around fairly well and created a good handful of opportunities, and they defended quite solidly whenever Leeds were actually able to hold onto the ball for a full set. Saints also had a lot of regulars sat on the sideline, so to be fair, this was quite an impressive win. The only problem is the teams above them don't deserve to move down. So I need to see Saints compete with more of the teams above them, which we won't see until round 17. But a good job from Saints last round, but for now they stay in 7th. Next up, we have the group of teams where most of you will likely disagree. So last week, the order was Wakefield in 6th, Leigh 5th, and Hull FC in 4th. That's the group that I'm looking at for this bit. So I'll give you my order, and I'll do my very best to justify it, because people will disagree, but this is how I'm looking at it, okay? So, here we go. My order is unchanged. Here's why. Wakefield Trinity beat Wigan Warriors at the weekend, and they've now won 3 in their last 5 games. So they've earned 6 points in their last 5. For points difference in those last 5 games, they've scored 166, which is the best of the 3 teams we're talking about, and they've conceded 76, which is second best. Leigh beat Catalans this week. Maybe it was less convincing compared to others in recent weeks, but they still won. They've also earned 6 points in their last 5. They're the 3rd best in both attack and defence compared to these 3 teams in those 5 games. However, the 2 reasons why I'm putting Leigh over Wakefield is that Leigh have won 3 games in a row, which is more important when prioritising recent performances, and one of those wins was against Wakefield. So they still have the edge over them, and they were clearly the better side in that game, in my opinion. Hull FC is a tricky one, because I know there are people that think they should be lower down, but in the last 5 they've also earned 6 points, and for attack and defence they're 2nd in attack and 1st in defence amongst these 3 teams in the last 5. The justification that they should be above Leigh includes 1, those stats that I just mentioned about recent points difference. They've scored more and conceded less than Leigh. And 2, in their last 5, they've played Catalans Dragons, Leigh's last opponent. And as I mentioned earlier, it was 12-all between Leigh and Catalans until the Dragons got a yellow card, which would have helped Leigh, whereas Hull FC beat Catalans 34-0 just a few weeks ago, so they were more convincing there. And point number 3, only 4 weeks ago, Hull FC beat Leigh, by a decent margin as well. So although it's not very recent, it's still only a few matches ago. So there are my reasons for having Leigh above Wakefield and Hull FC above Leigh. And just to be very clear about something, because I think people kind of view this a particular way, just to be very clear about this. When I have one team above another, it doesn't mean that the gap is massive. Because some people might be thinking the gap between, say, Hull FC and Wakefield, in my head, is the difference between the floor of a house and the roof of a house. But in my head, all 3 teams are stood on the staircase together by a difference of 1, 2, or 3 steps. That's how close it is. It's not this massive gap. They are extremely close. And the tiniest thing could make them change. But I think there are very clear reasons why Hull FC are above Leigh and they're above Wakefield. For now. But things can easily change next week. So on to 3rd place, and still in 3rd, I have the Leeds Rhinos. They were poor against Saints. Their completion rate was awful, so we barely saw them string a set together. They gave away a fair few penalties and dropped the ball way too often, just gifting Saints great field position. I think a better attacking side in recent weeks could have possibly destroyed Leeds at the weekend, but they at least kept the points conceded to 18, which I think is still fine. Now, their attack does still need a little bit more work in general anyway. When they did have possession and move the ball around, they did show some positive signs with strong carries or decent meters gained towards the edges. I could have been tempted to move them up this week if they'd made the comeback against Saints, but since they didn't, I haven't given it much thought. And I also can't move them down, since they were on a 5-game win streak before this lapse in performance, and 2 of those wins were against Hull FC and Wakefield. But with Leigh coming up for Leeds next, depending on how that goes, we could see some movement between this group in next week's list. But for now, Leeds stay in 3rd. On to 2nd place, and still in 2nd, I have Wigan Warriors. In back-to-back weeks, they haven't looked very convincing, not to say they were perfect before that, but there has been a notable drop-off in performance. I'm not smart enough to confidently say what that's down to. Maybe teams are just starting to figure them out a little bit more in certain areas, or they came up against 2 sides that just matched up quite well. Wakefield was a team that I mentioned that could cause problems in my predictions video, and Huddersfield have a really strong forward pack that competed well up front. Wigan are still, of course, a really strong side, who were on a massive win streak before this loss. I don't think the last 2 weeks are anything to panic about for Wigan fans, nor would they. But maybe there's just something to keep in mind when it comes to expectations and predictions in the next few rounds. But Wigan Warriors, still a strong enough side, stay in 2nd. Finally, in 1st place, and still in 1st, I have Hull Kingston Rovers. I'm basically still waiting for them to all get fat off the back of these free breakfasts that they keep earning. But they're on an 8-game win streak in Super League, conceding 14, 14, 0, 0, 12, 4, 6 and 0 in those 8 games. That's 6.25 points per game in those 8 games. With the 14 points they conceded, coming against Hull FC and Leeds, their two strongest opponents in that run of games as well. Now, they were in full control against Castleford at the weekend. It looked so clean when they moved the ball around. They defended really resiliently in their own half as well, because Cass did have some decent field position to work with a fair few times in Hull KR's half, but they just remained strong and kept them out all game. I guess the next thing that they could aim for is just getting that win over Wigan later in the season. Not that they need to, since they'll win the League Leader Shield if they win all other games, but it could just be good for psychological reasons, just getting that win over the Wigan Warriors before possibly meeting them in the grand final or at another stage in playoffs. Anyway, I think it's going to take a huge drop-off in performance in recent weeks, or a gradual performance in the next few months for Wigan to be able to retake that top spot, or for anyone to be able to catch up and possibly take number one. But for now, Hull KR are playing incredibly well in attack, in defence, and they stay in first place. So there you have my Super League Round 15 power rankings. If you guys have your own list, please do let me know in the comment section down below. But as always, if you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like. It does help to get the video out there to more people. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with more Kinetic Rugby League content. Check out the Kinetic Rugby League website in the description down below. And if you'd like to join the Discord, there's also an invite link in the description as well. And if you'd like to become a member, you can do by clicking the join button below this video and joining for as little as £1 per month. But that's going to be it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.